Well, I'm glad that you like it because it's one of my most favorites as well. Red ginseng is one of the crown jewels in traditional Chinese medicine. If you found a 20, 25-year-old red ginseng root that was of a decent size, because the longer it stays in the ground, the more powerful it becomes, you could get gold and jewels for that find. It was huge. It was like winning the
Hmm.
lottery. There were laws on the books in China for a while
Wow.
that only the emperor and the emperor's family were allowed to use red ginseng because it was such a powerful herb. The most important thing to remember is that while there are natural medicines that are clinically proven to make a difference in your life, it's not what you take, it's what you absorb.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 33. Look who's back in town. We're talking with Cheryl Myers today, Chief of Scientific Affairs for EuroPharma Inc. Cheryl's a healthcare professional with certifications in cancer, pain control, and issues of aging. She's an expert in dietary supplements and natural medicines who's been a featured guest on hundreds of radio and television shows. She's been interviewed by the New York Times, Prevention Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and Cheryl's a member of the editorial board of the Natural Medicine Journal. And her own published research has included topics such as menopause, diabetes, sleep disorders, and gastrointestinal function. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast here today, Cheryl Myers. How are we doing?
We're doing great. It's always a delight when I get to visit.
Trust me, Cheryl, I'm ready to take my notes here. I got my folder set up with Rebecca Hitchman. Thank you for all your work, Rebecca, and the whole team there at EuroPharma and Terry Naturally. Let's dive into it today. We're going to cover topics such as gamma cyclodextrin. Try to say that 10 times really quick. And even different types of liposomal vitamin C's that are available with quercetin. We have an extra strength option, a CoQ10 chewable, even a CuraMed chewable, the classic CuraMed. So the stage is yours. Cheryl, where do you want to start today and how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. And I think I'd like to start in the fact that there are a lot of nutrients that are incredibly beneficial for us, but they don't absorb very well. In
Mm,
fact, a lot of herbs, especially, might only absorb, 10% or 15%. There are certain herbs that only 2 or 3% of them will absorb when you use them. So
yeah.
you have to take rather large doses to get a little bit on board. So in order to have an effective natural medicine, it's not just about what you take, but whether you can absorb it. So the race has always been on to try to find things to boost absorption in a safe and predictable manner. And one of those ways is using something that sounds like Frankenstein. It's called cyclodextrin.
Hmm.
But when we hear cyclodextrin, it sounds like some strange chemical on a chemist shelf, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's a natural type of a small part of a starch that naturally occurs in plants. Ours is from non-GMO potatoes. So it's this tiny little, it's not a full starch, it's like a particle of starch that is shaped like a microscopic piece of elbow macaroni. So it's a little tube. It has an inside and an outside. It curves a little bit. It's bigger on one end than the other. The outside of the tube loves water. It's what you call hydrophilic. It loves water. The inside of the tube is lipophilic. It means it loves fats. So if you pack these tiny little starchy tubes with hard to absorb compounds that do better in a fat soluble matrix, it boosts absorption as much as eightfold, sometimes a little bit more. And they're extremely safe because they're just as I said, a part of a natural plant starch. They carry the nutrient to the wall of the intestines. It attaches easily because it's water soluble on the outside and delivers its load efficiently. So, because there are a number of compounds that are not very well absorbed, we have started to use a certain type of cyclodextrin called gamma cyclodextrin. Our trademark name is GammaSorb, and it is a system using the this particular kind of natural intervention to boost the absorptions, as you said earlier, of things like our HRG80 red ginseng product, turning our CuraMed into a chewable. We have a propolis chewable. Now, the advantage besides, the reason you might wonder why there's so many in chewables, the advantage of using GammaSorb besides boosting absorption is that it masks flavor. So if some, for
Oh.
example, I have tasted our red ginseng product. It is not something that I want to repeat. It was very bitter. But if you put it in a GammaSorb system, it completely masks that bitterness, and you can do a chewable that's actually quite tasty. So those are some of the reasons why. It also enhances stability a little bit as well. So it's just really an elegant system. Now, using cyclodextrin has been around for decades, and it's been used in the pharmaceutical industry. But there's different types of cyclodextrin: alpha, beta, delta, gamma. Gamma is the newest and the largest, and it has the best ability, in my opinion, to get those nutrients into the body. So that's why we have our unique GammaSorb system.
Fascinating, incredible. It makes berberine better.
Mhm.
It helps because one of the major criticisms of supplements, and this is straight from Terry Talks Nutrition, from one of his latest newsletters here. Nutrients must be absorbed to be effective, right, Cheryl? So one of the biggest criticisms, they're too difficult for the body to absorb, a lot of supplements. And that's the answer here is gamma cyclodextrin. Is that correct? Good way of looking at it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we have a CoQ10 chewable. It's 100 milligrams of coenzyme Q10. And CoQ10 is a wonderful, wonderful nutrient. It can be used for your heart. It can be used for your brain. I mean, the list goes on. Kidney. I think there's probably not a system in your body that wouldn't benefit from being supplemented with CoQ10. Well, CoQ10 with this system, this 100 milligrams absorbs about eightfold, which means it's closer to
Hmm.
like taking 800 milligrams of CoQ10. And if you are following a clinical trial, there are clinical trials on high dose CoQ10 for a number of ailments. If you're trying to dose up to a clinical trial, that can get really expensive. But if you
Right.
have it in a system that's already yielding an equivalent of close to 800 milligrams of CoQ10 by taking 100 milligrams with GammaSorb, then you're way ahead of the game, and it's a lot more affordable, even for those high dose protocols.
Folks, if you come into Healthy Habit Health Foods here at 6029 North 7th Street here in Central Phoenix, Arizona, you might see a layout that looks something like this here in the store with these products laid out here that we're discussing today with Cheryl Myers, that she just mentioned this one, the red ginseng here. Okay, we mentioned there's that CoQ10, and there's various other products. Hopefully with enough time today we'll touch on at least two or three of these, and all of these have the GammaSorb. Is that right, Cheryl?
Absolutely,
Got
they
it.
all do. Now, but I do want to say that most of these are chewable tablets, but some of them are capsules. You do not have to use GammaSorb in a chewable system. You can use it in a capsule.
Interesting. Okay, and that, again, up to 8x higher absorption. That I understand everything now. I had questions before we started on where is this GammaSorb? Is there a product that's has it in it? One only, but got it. It's our first ever GammaSorb products promotion, folks, which runs from actually April 1st to June 30th, 2023. Can you tell us a little bit more about this promotion?
Yes, I think that it's an opportunity to give people an incentive to try some nutrients that maybe they've tried in the past and didn't do very much for them. But if they actually get those doses boosted via this GammaSorb system so that they're getting a more medicinal level of nutrients on board, I think it's a great way to find out if this is something that's going to make a big difference in your life.
You mentioned red ginseng energy chewables, the
Mhm.
HRG80, 7x stronger, no sugar, artificial sweeteners in there. Ginseng's one of my favorite herbs, Cheryl, and we have so much. It's actually one of the most well studied herbs in the planet when it comes to medical journals supporting its use. Tell us a little bit about Korean red ginseng, aka Panax ginseng. Why should have this on their radar for improving their health?
Well, I'm glad that you like it because it's one of my most favorites as well. Red ginseng is one of the crown jewels in traditional Chinese medicine. Red ginseng is great for energy, but not just energy to go out and go disco dancing or rollerblading. It's energy for your body to do what your body needs to do. It's energy for your heart to beat. It's energy for your brain cells to fire. Red ginseng energy is an amazing product. The emperors used red ginseng because they thought that it extended life. It helped with fertility. If people did, it helped to prevent illness. And if people did get sick, it dramatically promoted recovery. So when we look at using ginseng, it's been, as I said, it's been a crown jewel for a long time. However, whenever something becomes extraordinarily powerful and popular, sometimes we start to see it diminish because of the way it's trying to be commercialized. And that's what
Mm.
happened with ginseng. So, the Chinese emperors and Korean emperors used to pay for 20-year-old red ginseng roots with gold and jewels. I mean, if you found a 25-year-old red ginseng root that was of a decent size, because the longer it stays in the ground, the more powerful it becomes, you could get gold and jewels for that find. It was huge. It was like winning the
Hmm.
lottery. There were laws on the books in China for a while
Oh.
that only the emperor and the emperor's family were allowed to use red ginseng because it was such a powerful herb. So we go from there to here, where the problem is that it's very difficult to find wild crafted ginseng anymore. So they've started to grow it, and they grow it in Korea, but mostly in China. And they just use just terrible systems to grow it because they can only harvest it after 7 or 8 years. Can you imagine if you had a crop that you could only harvest every 8 years? You better do everything to make sure that
Wow.
you
Yeah.
harvest a good crop. So they just drench it in pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, because since it's in the ground, there are certain fungi that can wreak havoc with the health of the plant. So they do all these things to it, and they're not very healthy compounds. And in fact, because of all this pesticides and herbicide residual, there are some ginseng that can't even be imported into the United States because they get randomly tested and find out that they have too high levels of these toxic compounds. So the reason I love this is because the red ginseng that we have access to, the HRG80, is grown hydroponically, which means there are no pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. It's grown in a hyperclean environment, and yet it is stressed periodically throughout the growth cycle in such a way that the ginseng develops strength. The problem with ginseng, if it's grown in the ground and cultivated and babied along and drenched with pesticides and herbicides, is it doesn't have to fight off anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't become very strong. But if you introduce some challenges, it makes the ginseng get stronger and stronger and stronger. And so the HRG80 is the equivalent of about 20-year-old wild-crafted ginseng. It has 7 times more of the rare noble ginsenosides, which are the compounds that provide the health benefits. And it's in this chewable boosted absorption system. So, in fact, I don't take a full chewable tablet of HRG80 red ginseng unless I'm going to have an incredibly vigorous schedule that day.
Mm.
Half a tablet is plenty for me. And what you notice is it's not like coffee, which I also like coffee, but it's not a stimulant. So the
Mm-hmm.
way that stimulants work is they block the receptors in your brain that hear your signals of fatigue and sleepiness. There's chemicals that your body makes that tell the brain, hey, I'm tired. Hey, I need rest. Hey, I'm sleepy. Well, caffeine blocks that. So it's not that it's doing away with your fatigue, it's just masking it. And then when the caffeine wears off, all those molecules come rushing in like a tidal wave, and now
Mm.
you really get hit. So the difference with red ginseng is it does not do anything about your perception of fatigue um, and sleepiness. It works at the other end of the equation. It helps keep you from becoming fatigued in the first place. And so this is not like a cup of coffee where you chew a tablet and a half hour later you're tap dancing and talking too quickly. No, it's more of a couple of hours. All of a sudden you'll notice that you just have more stamina. You get to the end of the day and you don't feel like going home to take a nap. You feel like maybe going out with some friends, or
Yeah.
instead of picking up carry out, you feel like cooking a 7-course meal. I mean, it's just a wonderful way to improve strength and stamina, and who doesn't want more of that? But
Yeah.
it's also great for people that are recovering from difficult situations, like your folks who've had just been run through the mill with chemotherapy or radiation therapy, and now they're done with their treatments, but they're very depleted, or someone that's been in a car accident or had a stroke or in physical therapy. These things are absolutely exhausting. And using red ginseng to help improve the energy and stamina of the body helps to improve recovery as well.
The three things I wanted to cover today with you, Cheryl, were the GammaSorb, or that gamma cyclodextrin, which we talked about in the beginning, the red ginseng energy, HRG80, and then next up, we'll get there towards the end here, the Berberine MetX, and then I think that would be a solid 3 to cover today. But real quick, so as a quick summary on that red ginseng, this is a trademarked form, a very specific form of ginseng that's in this product, correct, Cheryl? The HRG80, which gives you actual noble. It's called noble ginsenosides. Tell us about that real quick before we move on to the berberine. I want to hear, what are these noble ginsenosides?
Well,
Sounds fancy.
Some of the most studied medicinal ingredients in ginseng are called ginsenosides, and there's two basic kinds. There's classic ginsenosides, which has about 1 to 2% absorption. And then there are noble ginsenosides. They're also sometimes called rare ginsenosides that have much more dramatic absorption.
Mm,
There are also other healthy compounds in ginseng that you don't get with an extract. So when you take a ginseng extract, it's generally standardized, if it's standardized at all, to the classic ginsenosides, which means you get very, very little absorption and you don't know how much, if any, of the rare noble ginsenosides are in there. And you miss the other compounds like the gintans and the gintoins that are also beneficial that are not in the extract. So ours is a whole root powder, so you get the full spectrum of compounds. And because of the way that the plant is stressed as it is grown, periodically stressed, maybe one day they'll change the nutrition, or one day they'll make the room a lot colder, or one day they'll change access to sunlight. Whatever they do, when they stress it, the plant makes more and more and more of the rare noble ginsenosides. That's why, on average, this product has 7 times more of those heavy lifters than any other ginseng on the market.
incredible. So a good takeaway then with ginseng, correct me if I'm wrong, would you agree with these words then? Someone should think of these words when they hear red ginseng: mental, physical energy, but not like coffee, where it can cause too much or excess on the nerves. Resilience during stress. It's an adaptogen, really. Focus, concentration, stamina, endurance. What else would you add to that, Cheryl? Is that a good way to look at
I
ginseng?
think absolutely. And I would throw in there recovery because it takes energy
Recovery.
to come back. If you break your leg, you use a lot of body energy to heal that break and to bring your muscles back to where they used to be. Any assault on the body needs more strength. And that's why you can use this every day if you just want to, as I say, have a little bit more energy at the end of the day. You can use it as needed if you are in a situation where you need enormous amounts of energy.
Yeah. Perfect. One chewable tablet a day is the recommendation. I'm sure if you took two, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But always work with your doctor on that. Ginseng's an incredibly well tolerated plant. So perfect. That's a good summary then on the red ginseng energy. Again, this is what it looks like if you come in looking for this on the shelves. Okay, that's by Terry Naturally. Look for that up to 7x stronger. Okay, we have the GammaSorb in there, the gamma cyclodextrin. We'll finish off on this note here, covering the Berberine MetX Ultra Absorption. Cheryl, I don't know if you and I have talked about berberine, or at least it's been over a year at this point, or 2 years. Let's segue into Berberine MetX.
I don't recall that we have talked about
Right, I
berberine.
agree.
Berberine is a really interesting substance. Berberine is not a plant. A lot of people say, where do you get the berberine plant? You don't. Berberine is a compound found in several plants. But if it's extracted and concentrated, it can provide some really amazing benefits for the body. The thing I love about berberine is that it's so good at each of the issues that are associated with metabolic syndrome. So when we look at one of the fastest growing epidemics on the planet, well, we would look at the rise in obesity, the rise in type 2 diabetes, and the rise in the cluster of symptoms that yields metabolic syndrome. And that's high blood pressure, uh, disjointed cholesterol. You got the high LDL and the low HDL instead of having them in better balance. Abdominal obesity, sometimes they call that the spare tire in men or the donut in women, and prediabetes or outright diabetes. All of these are like dominoes in a row that when you start to have issues with the way your metabolism works, it's just click, 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 click. Diabetes, all of a sudden putting on weight, all of a sudden your cholesterol's all screwed up, and all of a sudden your blood pressure's starting to climb. So that's why I love berberine, is because it tackles each and every one of these. There were 24 people with metabolic syndrome in a published placebo-controlled study that took this for 3 months, 500 milligrams, 3 times daily for 3 months, and they found that there was just statistically significant reductions in their body mass index, their waist size,
Hmm.
their glucose levels, 42% reduction in triglycerides, significant decrease in blood pressure, and 20% reduction in insulin resistance. So
Wow.
it works at a very deep level in the body. It works at the cellular level in the way that we make energy. So we make energy we start with a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We knock off one of the phosphates, which releases energy, and then it becomes ADP. And then we have to either rebuild it back up to ATP, or if we're in an energy deficit situation, we knock off another phosphate. Now you're down to AMP, which is harder to restore. So that I know that sounds a little complicated, but the way that berberine works is it helps protect that energy production system so that you don't get as depleted, and it facilitates that conversion of how your body changes nutrients into fuel. So it's just as I said, it's a little bit complicated the way that it works. It's on this system called AMPK, but it just know that it's been clinically studied and it works. Now, the studies were generally on 500 milligrams 3 times a day, but a lot of people, berberine is extremely poorly absorbed. Sometimes as low as 2 to 5% of berberine is actually absorbed. So that's why this was one of the key players that we wanted to introduce into the GammaSorb system, to try to boost that ability for individuals to get that berberine into the body. So for individuals who are worried about absorption, we do have that GammaSorb form. For individuals who maybe sometimes people have some adverse effects from taking high doses of berberine, not always, it's a very safe herb, but sometimes people can get some stomach upset or some changes in their digestion. And if that bothers them, switching to the ultra absorption might be just the answer that they need in order to feel better.
Wow. Fascinating. Just one a day is the suggested, which would give you 250 milligrams of the berberine, which is also called Indian barberry, which is cool. And then Berberis aristata is the botanical name, coming from the bark and the root of the plant, which is very important. The plant part is what determines if it's even going to be effective. So when you think of berberine, what are some words in that case? Like we mentioned, remember, ginseng was, think stamina, endurance, recovery, energy, strength, right? What do you think of when it comes to berberine then? What would be some words that highlight its benefits?
Reducing blood sugar,
Yeah.
reducing high blood pressure, rebalancing cholesterol. So you have higher levels of the good kind and lower levels of the not so good kind. And even making a difference. I wouldn't ever pitch this or recommend this as a quote weight loss product.
Okay.
But when you start metabolizing more correctly and when you reduce insulin resistance, you will naturally have a reduction in weight because your body is burning calories more efficiently. So, I mean, as I said, you can get a reduction in weight and waist size using this product along with other changes in lifestyle. So it's just, as I said, I think that it's just something that could help very many people that are struggling with all this cluster of issues.
And it is called Berberine MetX, Met for metabolism, correct? So
correct,
that's
absolutely.
a good way to think of metabolic benefits, correcting lipid ratios, the blood fats, triglycerides, blood pressure, sugar, diabetes. Think of that when it comes to berberine. And it's gone head to head against metformin in studies, which with great results without all the side effects.
Absolutely.
Which is always a positive. So can you combine this with the ginseng? Would those work well together, those two herbs?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people say, well, if I take one, can I take the other? Well, of course, there are some instances where there's certain things in the natural products world that you don't want to take together. However, for the most part, nutrients work and play well together.
Right.
And you could take the berberine, you could take our CuraMed chewable, you could take our CoQ10 chewable, you could have a whole buffet of chewable tablets and you're not going to run into any issues with them interacting.
Yeah, for fun, what would be, I'll give you mine, but what would be two herbs that wouldn't be a smart thing to add together? Maybe like kava and then the red ginseng. Would that be a good example?
That may well be because kava is pushing you to relax and to sometimes makes people tired, and this is pushing in the other direction. One thing that you should not take together is strontium and calcium.
Okay.
Because strontium and calcium, while both good for bones, compete with each other for absorption. And so if you want to use strontium to build stronger bones, you should take your calcium at breakfast, your strontium at dinner, or vice versa, in order to not have that competition. But as I said, for the most part, most supplements, there's no issues with using them together.
Folks, you turned into a good one here today for episode number 33. We're coming to the end here. We've been talking with the Chief of Scientific Affairs here at EuroPharma Inc. and Terry Naturally. It's always a good one with Cheryl. What's a good take home for us, Cheryl Myers? I just highlighted the special promotion we have going on with the GammaSorb products. Remember that lineup I showed in the beginning of this video, folks? Come into Healthy Habit and look for this lineup of products, which includes the red ginseng that we just mentioned, as well as that Berberine MetX. What's a good take home here, Cheryl? This was an awesome episode. Give us a take home.
Well, I think that the most important thing to remember is that while there are natural medicines that are clinically proven to make a difference in your life, it's not what you take, it's what you absorb. So paying attention to absorption just makes sense. The other thing is to work with clinically studied ingredients, because the most expensive product you will ever buy is the one that does absolutely nothing for you. So, working with integrative practitioners, working with retail establishments that pay attention to the science is always going to be the best for you and your health.
Absolutely. And I can't wait till our next discussion. Thank you, Cheryl, for your time, and to the whole team there, Rebecca and everybody else there at Terry Naturally and Terry himself. You guys are incredible.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our next chat.